President Muhammadu Buhari christened the 2021 appropriation bill, which he presented to the National Assembly, a budget of economic recovery and resilience. According to him, the budget reflects the determination of his administration to pull the country through the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. The president warned that the journey will not be an easy one, adding that within the cycle of the next 4 years, Nigeria would likely be hitting another low point, economically speaking. Economic analysts say the president couldn't have been more sincere in his submissions. Joining us now to take a closer look at the policy implications of that budget and his presentation is PEREKUNAH EREGHA, Professor of Macroeconomics at Pan-Atlantic University here in Lagos. Professor EREGHA, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, very
good morning,
quickly,
Nigerians.
Yes, very quickly, the president, while presenting the budget yesterday before the National Assembly, talked about budget of economic recovery and resilience. But there have been concerns about the estimates in that budget, the personnel cost and debt servicing taking about 52.6%, GDP projected at 3%, whereas we've been told that we may not be able to do more than 1.6%. Questions have also been raised about the other benchmarks. But what's your take on the proposals by the executive arm of government?
Okay, good morning. If you listen to the presidential speech even yesterday, you will know that the president is skeptical about a number of things. Number one, he keep repeating the debt service, which is around 3.12. He also repeated another statistics that was interesting, and that has to do with the deficit of about 5.2, and it also emphasized the borrowing. He said there will be new borrowing of about 4.8. So if you look at that speech, he highlighted or almost repeated, those statistics, and that is a place for concern in the sense that, as of today, by DMO report, we have a debt stock of about 31 trillion. Okay, and so if we are going to have new borrowing, the implication of that is that will be added into the current debt stock, and that means that our debt stock will rise. And over the time, you know that prior to 2015, debt to GDP ratio probably was around maybe 11%. Okay, but over time it has increased up to today around 22%. That tells you that there might be some concern we should have for debt crisis. Okay, so for this budget, he called this budget the budget of recovery and resilience. And the main highlight of the resilience issues that he's actually talking about has to do with the diversification of the economy, making the economy competitive, and then, and lastly, issue about job creations and poverty reduction. And you know that the president has promised that within the next 10 years, he's going to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. So these are the concerns for the government, and then these are some of the things that the government is putting forward concerning this budget. But there are a number of serious concerns for the statistics, okay, a number of them. If you look at 2019, 2020 budget, if you look at the performance of those budgets, we cannot fairly say that the government has done well in terms of efficiency of government spending, okay? For instance, revenue falls short so much, and with COVID, there is a serious concern. Listen to what the president said. He also had a concern by himself for revenue, which is domestic resource mobilization. And he said it's a challenge for them. And so if you have that kind of challenge, and then over the years you have increased expenditure gradually. For instance, the increase last year it was about 10.8. That is a revised budget based on COVID, but currently it's about 13.008. And that is almost, on Naira terms, it's about 30% increase, okay? But in dollar terms, probably it should be about 13%, because in dollar terms, in the COVID, in the revised budget at 360, it will be around maybe 30 billion US dollars. But in the current one, which is at 379, it will be around 34, and that is about 13% increase. So one thing that is advised, in economics is that when you are challenged with the source of income or revenue, then one advice is to ensure fiscal discipline. Another advice is to ensure that when you don't gradually increase expenditure when you are constrained. So you also consider the source of your finance before you begin to gradually increase your expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't even have to be an economist to know that. And it's not about if we borrow, it's when. Because when you have a budget, like you said, of 13.8 trillion naira and your revenue target is only 8.24 trillion, the shortfall is going to be made up by borrowing. And we also have this budget with 33% devoted to personnel costs. Let's talk about our over-bloated, over-expensive budget. And the fact that, as our previous news analyst just said, Mr. Feni, he just told us how, he reminded us of how when the president announced the 128 billion devoted to the National Assembly, he was met with rapturous applause. Why is the National Assembly getting 128 billion naira when health, in the middle of a pandemic, is 132 billion naira? Education, 127 billion naira. What does this say about our priorities? And does it give light to this budget that's been titled Recovery and Resilience?
Yeah, thank you. And that is a concern for the government, because when you say you have a budget of recovery and resilience, and if the key three items that he mentioned on resilience has to do with social inclusion, okay, economic diversification, and then the last one is making the economy globally competitive. And then with COVID, COVID has exposed to us. Even it's not because that COVID exposed the economy or exposed Nigeria as we have. We already know that we're already having a dilapidated, a health sector that was nothing to write home about. Okay, but COVID now came and then exposed to us because there was travel restrictions, so some many people couldn't travel, and then you see what happened. And so we expect that with COVID and post-COVID budget, we should have a proper plan for serious plan for human capital development, which health is also a key aspect. So if you look at the health expenditure compared to last year, what is the increase that is coming in? What of education? So if you are talking about social inclusion, I always tell people that one of the areas you can ensure social inclusion is to ensure that you bring everybody to base on education, especially at the basic level. Okay, at the basic level, for instance, that we have standard educational schools, public schools, where the rich and the poor can attend. So there is no need for somebody to go into the private sector. So we have the same kind of education being, experienced about the rich and the poor. So at that level, you are bringing everybody to equality, okay? And the same thing for primary health care. When the populace which assess the same standard of health care at the primary level, you are bringing them to base. And that is what can guarantee social inclusion. But when you have a plan or a budget that does not take cognizance of that, then you question the goal or the objective of ensuring social inclusion. And I thought that they are talking about social inclusion with regards to their social intervention funds. Now the question is that as of today, we don't have a proper database for those who are vulnerable, even SMEs that are really impacted by COVID or even before COVID. We don't have a serious database for them. So I will sure that some of these funds being released, we get into the target is a place of concern. And so if we are talking about social inclusion and global competitiveness, key things that are very, very key is education, health, and then you also talk about institution. So because you know that efficiency of government spending has a serious role to play, and the reason why today we have a rising debt stock that is, debt service to revenue is also as high as 60%, meaning that we have less revenue to be able to finance, available infrastructure. And that also calls for a concern for the kind of private partnership framework we have for financing budgets. And so those are some of the things that government should take into cognizance and begin to look into, as even the National Assembly begin to look into the page by page of this budget that has been presented to them. Thank you.
Okay. I saw the budget yesterday. About 56% goes to debts and other recurrent costs. 56%. When Bill Gates was speaking, he said we should invest more in the social economy. But I still even see that, despite the fact that we have a remainder of about 44% to do other things like cap infrastructure and things like that, are we getting our priorities right? Because what Bill Gates was speaking about when he said invest in the social economy, I thought that education will have taken a lot. I thought that health will have taken a lot. But I didn't see that. I saw the National Assembly taking its normal 128 billion and the likes. But I didn't see that. I saw investment and infrastructure. Do we even need those infrastructure now, the ones we are doing at the expense of the social well-being of the people?
Okay, Rufai, thanks. Do we need infrastructure? Yes, we need it. But the question is the source of finance and the number of years it's taking us to deliver on those infrastructure. Okay? You know that, for instance, Lagos to Ibadan Express, last time I came to your studio, I said that Lagos to Ibadan Express has taken us so many years to build. Why? The reason is that government, every year put a small amount in the budget to finance that project. And so it has taken longer than we expect. Now, today, government is putting so much in terms of financing the railway sector. This is a sector that was booming before, but today is dead. And now the same government is coming back to finance that with resources that are not even really there. So the question, what is the framework for us coming back to revive the railway sector? Even though it's a major sector that can facilitate growth vis-a-vis to any of the things that we could think about as a good economy. But the consign is the framework for reviving it. If government is still going to be the one that will manage some of this infrastructure, I can say categorically that we are also still planning to fail, because the same experience that they experience is what we're going to experience. But on the other side, social investment is very key for an economy where almost 90% of the populace are in poverty, okay? And unemployment in the last release was running to almost 20-something%. Youth unemployment is as high as 50%. And that kind of economy, then we need to look beyond, just the face value of budgeting, but we need to have a proper framework and plan that can deliver onto us what it takes to take us out of this quagmire of run, on the same circle of just increase in expenditure without having the right implication or impact on the economy. And what are these things? See, we cannot run away from the fact that today institutions are weak and the efficiency of government spending will be hampered. And so what is government doing concerning that? We cannot run away from the fact that today we have a domestic resource mobilization challenge in terms of domestic revenue. We cannot run away from the fact that oil is going away. And so we should think of alternative way. What is the thinking behind the plan and the budget in taking us away from reliance or dependence on oil? Oil today, you look at what anytime crude oil goes down, and it is exogenous because we don't have the control of it, and for that, anytime it goes down, we are at the mercy of OPEC, at the mercy of different countries and all of that. So for a country, we need a proper thinking through to be able to plan that we have to graduate away from oil, whether in terms of production, whether in terms of export, that could guarantee the trade surplus, will guarantee correct account balance, that will bring in the needed foreign exchange, that will help us to stabilize or will help us to mop out our foreign reserve. So that should be the thinking behind whatever budget. Because budget is a one-year implementation of a plan. Okay, so that is the thinking that should go through. Thank you,
Professor EREGHA. Well, at this point, let's take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us is PEREKUNAH EREGHA, Professor of Macroeconomics at the Pan-Atlantic University here in Lagos. Professor EREGHA, thank you for staying with us. Well, if you may just complete your thoughts before we went on that short break. And after that, I would like to draw your attention to something in the president's speech. He specifically said we should pay attention not just to the expenditure side, but also to the revenue side. And there was some reference about budget revenue accruing from even the smallest MDA. How much hope can you invest in that?
Okay. My former thought was on the fact that there is actually infrastructure are critical, okay? But the only concern is that even when we are spending on such infrastructure, we need to also have a concern for managing those infrastructure. Maintenance is a key thing. So if we are spending so much on railway, spending so much on some of these like road and all of that, then we also need to have a proper planning concerning how they will be maintained, how they will be managed. So if you see the same government that failed us in the time where these infrastructures were booming, and now we still put them in the hand of the same government to manage, in spending so much to also maintain them, then we are planning to almost fail. And so we need a proper framework to move away from that. That is one aspect. The second aspect has to do with the fact that what is the private partnership framework for financing infrastructure? It's a key question we must also answer. Okay, so now the last one is also a concerning what is the thinking behind our planning with regards to moving away from oil in terms of production, in terms of revenue, in terms of export. This is key thing, and that should inform a serious thinking behind our planning in terms of even budgeting. And so if we keep planning towards using the same oil that today everybody is moving away from, you know quite well that today the world is shifting away seriously from beyond COVID effect that has impacted transportation and all of that has, affected the price of crude oil. Oil is no more, enticing. The world has moved away. Today we're talking about electricity cars and so many other things. And because of environmental impact of such source of energy, we are shifting away. So if that is the concern, then we should have a better thinking towards our budgeting and how we can move away from depending on oil. And that I did not really see as regards our revenue. Now, coming back to your question, the president, was also of the fact, and he made that statement clear that they have a challenge for revenue. And when he made that statement, it was so clear that it's almost like they don't know what to do. But if you actually look at his presentation, and prior to that presentation, when the National Assembly had a meeting with the National Council had a meeting with the Minister of Finance, she made it very clear that 2020 budget, they brought in 10 government-owned enterprise, and now they are bringing in another 50, so making up to 60. So if you are bringing a government-owned enterprise and some of them were revenue-generating agencies that you are not bringing into the budget, we should see some fair, play in terms of improvement in revenue as against the expenditure also. But that is also a concern that we should have as government as we plan towards 2021. Okay.
So much has been made of our new budgetary cycle, January to December budgetary cycle. What are the practical implications of that for the average Nigerian? Because all we're hearing is that the presidency and the National Assembly seem quite pleased with themselves about that. But can you tell us what that means for the rest of us? And also, the president also seemed impressed with the implementation of the 2020 budget. I'd like your thoughts on that, as well as the Finance Act that supported that budget. Okay, thanks.
Budget is budget is seen in government policy as fiscal policy, and fiscal policy don't have instantaneous effect on economy. Instantaneous in the sense that when you release a budget this year and finance is released, it takes close to 2-3 years for it to have impact. And so when government is affirmative with statements that this budget is going to take us out of recession or is going to ensure recovery and social inclusion, all of that, that will not happen in 2020 or 2021, because if you are starting a project, capital project, it takes 2-3 years for that project to be completed. So it takes a lapse of time for government policies, especially fiscal policy with regards to budgeting, to have impact on economy. And so they should take a caution with regards to being affirmative. Now, there are a number of channels through which government spending impact on economy. Number one is growth. Okay, if government spending have impact on economic growth, definitely income will increase, production will increase, and all of that. It can also have impact on inflation. As of today, we have about 13.22% inflation. Okay, and border closure is there. Tariff issues are also, the electricity tariff is also there. Subsidy removal are some of the areas of concern that part of structural constraints to supply. And some of these constraints have implication for pricing and more inflation. And as more inflation comes into bear, what happens is that the production cost increases, production itself begins to go down, and it has, indirect effect on the same revenue, the same economic growth that you wanted to facilitate with your budget, and vis-a-vis on the same revenue. So a budget cycle of 12 years that has been implemented now is good. It then implies that within the 12 months, a budget cycle of 12 months implies that within the 12 months, the capital expenditure aspect will be implemented. Unlike before, that budget is approved around May, to take the second year for us to implement that, and with constraint from revenue. So it means that within the 12-month calendar, we can implement our capital budget. But that is also a function of government efficiency to implement that budget to 100% before it can have the right impact on the economy.
That's what I want to pick on. We never implement the budget up to 100%. In fact, I think last year we did about 62% implementation. But out of that 62% implementation, you can see the amount that is funneled by corruption. You heard about the 2.1 billion that was supposed to be for school feeding program. One of the ministries greatly awarded money last time was the humanitarian ministry that was just set up. But the money sent to that ministry, 2.1 billion found in a private account. So how do we balance this out?
Okay. One of the reasons why our budget don't perform the way they should perform is because the institutions shadowed with the power are either weak, or they are not doing their job, or some level of rent seeking is behind it, and so they don't monitor the budget implementation process as it should be. Because when a budget is passed, then oversight functions, and that is not only to National Assembly, that is also to civil society group and what they are doing with regards to monitoring and implementation of budget process. In a system that is prone to rent seeking, we need them to be very strong and strengthened. And maybe that is the reason why our institutions are weak, okay? And you know that Nigeria is one of these countries over the years that have run a budget deficit for a long time, even during oil boom. And now that we should sit tight and have a proper plan, we are also, escalating our deficit. And the implication of that can be far-fetched. Some of the implications are twin deficit, which means that our current account will be at deficit, and that has implications for foreign exchange vis-a-vis to foreign reserve declining to exchange rate implication. Okay, some of the other implications are crowding out of private investment, help us to strengthen capital formation. So these are some of the things that will come to bear as we have this kind of budget going forward. And so the truth is that for us, we have not been able to implement our budget even up to, especially the capital aspect. For the current, we can say we have performed up to 90%. But capital expenditure is always below expectation. And let me also put this across.
Professor EREGHA, well, we'll have to take a short break at this point. After thanking you very much for your insights and for always obliging us each time we invite you. I'm sure the conversation around the budget would continue. Thank you very much indeed.